Let me start with something that might feel uncomfortably familiar. You wake up early, rush through your morning, commute, and work hard, maybe harder than most people around you. You stay late, take on extra responsibility, and do everything you were told would lead to success. And yet, at the end of the month, you're still checking your bank account before buying something small. You're exhausted, but you're not ahead, and there's this quiet thought you try not to sit with for too long. Is this really all my hard work is worth? If that sounds like you, let me say this clearly. You're not lazy, you're not irresponsible, and you didn't fail, but you might be playing a game where hard work was never the winning strategy. I spend way too much time thinking about why most people will never be rich, even while working hard. And if you're someone trying to improve your financial life, consider subscribing. And if this video helps you see things differently, a thumbs up really does help the channel. Because what we're about to talk about isn't motivational, it's structural, and once you see it, it becomes very hard to ignore. Here's the thing most people don't want to admit. Hard work is not what creates wealth. In fact, for most people, working harder actually locks them deeper into the same financial position. That sounds wrong, almost offensive. We're taught that effort equals reward, that if you just push harder, stay disciplined, and sacrifice enough, the money will eventually follow. But the system doesn't work that way anymore. So let's start with the math, because numbers don't care how motivated you are. The average full-time worker in the United States earns about $60,000 a year, and after federal taxes, state taxes, payroll taxes, health insurance, and basic deductions, that becomes roughly $45,000 take-home, or about $3,700 a month. Now subtract reality. Rent or a mortgage can be $1,400 to $1,800 in most cities, utilities around $200, groceries $400 to $600, and transportation, insurance, phone, internet, subscriptions, and basic life expenses add another $600 to $800. If you're doing everything right, you might have $500 to $700 left at the end of the month. And that's in a good scenario. No emergencies, no surprise bills, no inflation spikes, and no job instability. So here's the honest question. How do you get rich from that? Even if you save an aggressive $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year, and invested consistently at a strong 7% return, it still takes decades to reach serious wealth, assuming perfect behavior and zero setbacks. But real life doesn't operate on spreadsheets. Cars break down, people get sick, jobs disappear, and prices rise faster than salaries. One bad year can erase 5 good ones. This is why so many people feel like they're doing everything right and still falling behind, because the math no longer supports the promise. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the real trap isn't just financial, it's psychological. When your income is tied directly to your time, your brain shifts into survival mode. You stop thinking long-term and start thinking in monthly cycles. Rent, bills, deadlines, paychecks, and you prioritize security over opportunity because you have to. This isn't a personal weakness, it's biological. Researchers at Princeton found that financial scarcity reduces cognitive capacity by the equivalent of losing 13 IQ points, not because people are unintelligent, but because stress consumes mental bandwidth. When you're worried about money, your brain becomes worse at planning, risk assessment, and long-term decision-making. So when someone asks why people don't just make better financial choices, they're missing the point. The system creates conditions where short-term decisions are rewarded and long-term thinking is punished. Now you might be thinking, what about people who make a lot of money? Doctors, engineers, lawyers, surely hard work works for them. Sometimes, but even there, the pattern is revealing. Doctors often spend their 20s and early 30s in school and training, graduating with $200,000 or more in student debt. When the high income finally arrives, lifestyle inflation shows up immediately. Bigger homes, better cars, private schools, vacations that feel like rewards for years of sacrifice. And suddenly, despite earning $300,000 a year, many doctors are still paycheck dependent. One missed paycheck feels stressful. One career disruption feels catastrophic. And that's not wealth, that's expensive stability. Here's what most people don't realize. Wealth is not about how much you earn, it's about how much control you have. Employees trade time for money, and that trade has a ceiling. No matter how hard you work, there are only so many hours in a day, and once your time is fully sold, your income stops growing. Owners, investors, and system builders operate differently. Their income is tied to assets, equity, and leverage, things that can grow without direct effort. This is the dividing line most people never cross, not because they're incapable, but because they were trained not to. From a young age, we're taught to value obedience, reliability, and safety. Get good grades, follow instructions, don't take risks, find something stable. But wealth doesn't come from being reliable. It comes from ownership and asymmetric bets. You can't optimize for safety and expect extraordinary outcomes. Imagine you're on a treadmill that speeds up slightly every year. That treadmill is inflation, and if you run just fast enough to stay in place, you feel exhausted but unchanged. To actually move forward, you need leverage, something that multiplies effort instead of consuming it. Most jobs don't offer leverage, they offer predictability, and predictability feels good, it feels safe, which is why so many people stay there even when it's quietly costing them their future. This is why two people can work equally hard and end up in completely different financial positions. One optimizes for security, the other optimizes for optionality. And here's what most people don't realize. The biggest financial decisions aren't about money, they're about identity. If you see yourself as just an employee, you'll always optimize for job security. If you see yourself as an owner, you start looking for assets. And if you see yourself as someone who builds systems, your entire decision-making framework changes. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It starts the first time you question the assumption that effort automatically leads to wealth. So what actually moves the needle? First, leverage, finding ways to separate income from hours worked, whether that's equity, scalable skills, ownership, or systems that continue producing value without your constant presence. Second, time horizon. Most people optimize for short-term comfort because they're trapped in short-term stress, but wealth is built by people who can tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term freedom. Third, environment. If everyone around you is optimizing for comfort, you will too. But if everyone around you is building, investing, experimenting, and thinking long-term, that behavior becomes normal. And finally, belief. Not motivational belief, but structural belief. The belief that wealth is built, not earned, that systems beat effort, and that ownership beats obedience. This is why most people will never be rich, even while working hard, not because they failed, but because they were playing a game where hard work wasn't the winning move. But here's the good news. Once you understand the rules of the game, you can change how you play it. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow. You don't need to gamble, and you don't need $1 million idea. You need awareness, patience, and the willingness to stop blindly following advice that no longer works. The moment you stop asking, how do I work harder, and start asking, how do I build leverage, everything changes. And that's why this channel exists. So let me leave you with one question, because it cuts through everything. If working hard was enough, wouldn't far more people be rich by now?